Okay, the whiplash from Yu Fu's hilariously disastrous chili powder diplomacy with the deer tribe to the absolutely massive reveal of Cole is incredible. That first contact blunder felt so real, yet the swift recovery using salt was pure strategic. Brilliance. Then boom. The MC, instantly recognizing Cole and meticulously planning its exploitation, complete with washing and coking plants, just shows the insane level of foresight driving this whole nation-building enterprise. It's not just about grand gestures. The detail is staggering. Seeing Jingyan immediately start practical outpost construction, recruiting locals, grounds the huge discoveries. And the stark contrast between the Han diplomatic mission's grand send-off and the Sin delegation's quiet envy speaks volumes about the power shift underway. This isn't just exploration anymore. It's the dawn of an industrial engine fueled by unexpected finds. The sheer scale keeps expanding. Real men take on crocodiles. The fiercest hunters single out the most savage beasts. The men of the Han tribe, although somewhat influenced towards civilization by Yu, their leader from the modern era, hadn't completely shed the bloodthirsty wildness in their bones. After all, you had only been here less than 5 years, while their ancestors had relied on hunting for generations. Just now, having successfully brought down a massive 7 or 8 meter long crocodile, the crewmen, who had been cooped up on the boat for days, started roaring with excitement. After efficiently butchering the first crocodile, the group, now pumped up, grabbed their tools and, repeating their earlier success, rushed back to the riverbank. Using gleaming iron hooks, they invited several more unlucky crocodiles ashore. In moments, the riverbank was stained red with blood, squishing and oozing mud underfoot. Yet among Commander Yu Fu's 200 or so crewmen, not a single one complained of fatigue. Instead, they grew more energetic the longer they worked, as if they were on stimulants. Commander Yu, look at this fish beast. So much. Meat pure white looks just like chicken. Wonder what it tastes like. It's gotta be delicious. Didn't you see how strong it was? What did the leader call that again? Right, muscle. The leader said things with well-developed muscles. Taste good. Commander, this fish monster's hide is so tough, harder than cowhide. Making boots or armor out of this would definitely be durable. Should we keep some of the hide? A crewman shouted towards Yu Fu, waving a piece of crocodile back armor. Yu Fu took it and weighed it in his hand. Thinking it seemed promising, he bellowed, "Brothers, this hide is useful. Take it back for the leader to look at. Who knows what kind of treasure he can whip up. Stop hacking away at the meat. Aim for the head. Peel the hide off clean for us." "You got it. Watch me, Commander." "Got it. Easy does it, brothers. Don't tear the hide. This stuff is valuable. Commander Yu, this fish monster has plenty of fat too. Should we scrape some off?" Keep it. Take whatever looks good. Everyone eats their fill today and make plenty of jerky to keep as snacks on the boat. Quick. Someone lend a hand. I've hooked another big one. Whoa, I can barely hold on." Things on Yu Fu's side were bustling with activity, like it was New Year's. But in the nearby woods, a group of people from the Li tribe, clutching the cats they raised like treasures, were peeking from behind the bushes, eyes wide as saucers, observing stealthily. A hushed chatter immediately followed. "What are those things in their hands? They're too fierce. They can even pierce the water monster's tough hide?" Who knows? Where did these people come from? Every single one of them is like a fierce beast. Strange, how come there aren't any women or children? Is it just a hunting party? Then how many people must their tribe have? What they're wearing is weird too. That slippery material definitely isn't animal hide. And those things on their feet, what are those black things? Right, and their hair is all tied up on top of their heads. Must be for convenience while working, right? Look how they kill the water monsters. Their hair doesn't get in the way at all. Forget about that for now, the young chief of the Li tribe interrupted with a frown. The crucial thing is, should we go over and make contact? With them making such a ruckus by the river, all the prey has been scared off. We're usually hunting here at this time. If we don't go out soon, we'll all go hungry tonight. But if we go out, we'll definitely be discovered. And with our small frames, we'd surely lose if we fought them. But But what if they aren't good people? That thing they're holding is so scary, and they kill water monsters without batting an eye. They're definitely not to be trifled with. But this is our territory. They're outsiders. Well, what if they're decent folk? Look, their weapons are so amazing, and they're skilled hunters. They definitely don't lack food. They probably wouldn't just rob us, right? We're not trying to drive them away. Just want to hunt some small game nearby, too. We don't want the water monsters in the river. Just the animals that come to the bank to drink. That should be okay, right? Yeah, they have more meat than they can eat. They probably wouldn't mind us getting some food. Too? Maybe they're easy to talk to? If only we could trade for a couple of those weapons. They're incredible, piercing the water monster hide in one go. Last time the old chief led people to kill a water monster, they stabbed with bone and stone spears for ages but couldn't break through. Several people were dragged away, and many of the rest were bitten to death. If only we'd had that kind of weapon then. In your dreams. Even if they are easy to talk to, why would they trade such powerful weapons with you? Making those things looks much harder than sharpening stone spears. If it were you, would you part with it? All right. Stop arguing. What damn good is talking about that now? Even if they were willing to trade, who among you has the guts to go ask? So what do? We have to go out. If we stay here any longer, we'll really starve tonight. Should have saved that gourd from this morning for tonight. Wonder if we can find anything else to eat in the fields to the north. Shut up! Listen to the chief. Ahem. The young chief cleared his throat. As usual, first, we ask for the Lee Spirit's guidance. See if the revered one allows us to go. Hearing this, everyone nodded, indicating it made sense. Thus, the young chief carefully scooped up an old, mottled furred cat with world-weary eyes from beside him. Holding it with both hands, he raised it above his head, staring intently into the cat's eyes of different colors while starting to chant. However, the old cat seemed thoroughly annoyed by this procedure, letting out a dissatisfied rumble from its soft belly. The next second it struggled violently, escaping the worshipping hands. Its four paws landed precisely on the young chief's forehead, and it kicked off powerfully with its hind legs. Whoosh! The old cat turned into a streak of lightning. With a few leaps and bounds, quick as lightning, faster than you could blink, it shot straight towards the bustling butchering scene of the Han tribe on the riverbank. What choice did it have? It was too hungry. Following these useless masters would starve a cat sooner or later. Just look over there, even the scraps falling. Between their fingers would be enough to stuff yours truly. If not now, when would be a better time to switch sides? With the old cat taking the lead, the other household cats, as if receiving the signal to charge, rushed out in a great wave, swarming the riverbank occupied by the Han tribe. They began, frantically snatching up the scraps of meat and hide on the ground, tails held high warily as they eyed the Han tribe members. Yet they weren't particularly afraid. After all, hanging around humans daily had fattened their courage. Now it was the Han tribe crewmen's turn to be dumbfounded. Where did this bunch of furry little things come from? Daring to provoke the powerful, snatching food from the tiger's mouth? Although they were only grabbing unwanted scraps, they still had some nerve. Lee Spirit. The Lee tribe members were also dumbfounded. Why had their gods suddenly defected to the enemy en masse? These cats were treated like divine beasts in their tribe. Seeing the Lee spirits rush towards the Han tribe's gleaming butcher knives, several hot-headed tribesmen didn't even think, letting out a yell and charging out after them. This sudden turn of events startled everyone on both sides of the riverbank. Commander Yu, people are running over from there. Everyone, be careful. It's wild men. Yu Fu, sharp-eyed, immediately turned and roared a warning. Guided by the lofty principle of friendly exchange and peaceful development, and looking at the small mountain of crocodile piled on the ground, Yu Fu waved his hand magnanimously, inviting the Lee tribe to join them for dinner. After all, they had occupied the Lee tribe's territory and ruined their hunt. Letting them go hungry now would reflect poorly on you, their leader. Where would your reputation be then? The dinner spot was set up at the Lee tribe's camp. It wasn't far from the river, about 2 kilometers, a brisk 20-minute walk. The distance was quite ideal, convenient for reaching the river, yet far enough to avoid nocturnal visits from the river's fierce beasts. The ground was slightly elevated, offering both concealment and ventilation. It was quite a strategically advantageous spot. The camp was situated in a clearing on slightly higher ground within a small patch of woods, symbolically enclosed by a wooden fence. Inside were just over a dozen huts made of animal hides and thatch, incredibly crude but relatively clean. They were just poor, dirt poor, lacking even a decent number of proper stone basins. The Han tribe crewmen didn't say anything, but inwardly they grumbled about how primitive the environment was. As the saying goes, it's easy to grow accustomed to luxury, but hard to return to simplicity. Life in the Han tribe wasn't exactly luxurious, but they had convenient access to pots, pans, food, drink, and sanitation. Being abruptly thrown back to a more basic state felt genuinely jarring. Fortunately, the fleet was well equipped, bringing plenty of their own gear, so they wouldn't actually have to gnaw on dry rations out in the open. They set up their large iron woks on makeshift stone stoves, striking flint sparks to light the fires. 2 large pots of fragrant rice were put onto steam first, followed by a large cauldron of thick soup stewed with fresh crocodile meat. Unfortunately, there were no green vegetables, but the Lee tribe was quite accommodating, contributing some round gourds. These gourds were slightly larger than a fist, with green patterned rinds and bright red flesh dotted with black seeds. The juice was plentiful and sweet. If you were here, you'd recognize them instantly. Weren't these just miniature watermelons? They weren't large, averaging only 2 or 3 pounds each. These Han tribe members had long since developed an agricultural focus under your guidance. Seeing unfamiliar fruits made their eyes light up. The peerage system promulgated by the leader, that's you, stipulated, anyone who could contribute a new cultivable crop to the tribe performed a great service and would be generously rewarded. With so many people in the reconnaissance fleet, it was hard to attribute this merit to a single individual, but simply bringing back the seeds of this mini watermelon guaranteed a collective commendation. Therefore, without needing any orders from Yu Fu, everyone automatically and carefully collected the seeds as they ate the melon. They were all experienced in this regard. Having cultivated so many crops, especially the loofah, which had become known as the national vegetable and was widely grown, who didn't know that melon seeds were hidden within the flesh? Yu Fu thought further. This melon was sweet and juicy. Back home, maybe they could engage in some value-added processing. If they could make melon sugar, that would be a huge boon. The Lee tribe people watched the Han tribe members meticulously, picking out seeds while eating melon, completely bewildered, unable to fathom what they were doing. They themselves would unconsciously plant melons, spitting seeds randomly, or sowing them incidentally while relieving themselves. But without experienced elders to summarize and systematize this knowledge, the entire tribe spent its days preoccupied with hunting to fill their stomachs, never considering farming. This was the root cause of the Lee tribe's poverty and weakness. This tribe consisted mostly of young people, lacking a dedicated shaman for rituals or elders for command. It couldn't be helped. Hunting was too risky. Casualties were high, which naturally brought down the average age. Dinner was served. Yu Fu had his men distribute gleaming porcelain bowls to each Lee tribe member, piled high with fluffy white rice and crocodile meat, some stewed, some roasted. Most importantly, salt had been added. That salty, savory flavor combined with the sweet fragrance of the rice was something the Lee tribe members, young and old, were tasting for the very first time in their lives. They ate with intense concentration, chopsticks flying, unable to stop, afraid of missing even a single bite. On the other side of the table, Yu Fu was engaged in an animated negotiation with the Lee tribe's young chief, sparks practically flying. Neither was yielding an inch, and the talks were on the verge of fizzling out. "Here's the deal," Yu Fu stated firmly. "Trading for weapons is possible, but you can only use those little cats, small beasts in exchange. He knew full well that the Li tribe was so poor that only these furry little creatures held any real value. He had already gathered from their earlier chat that these little guys, despite their size, were quite capable, rivaling the Han tribe's dogs. They could catch mice on the ground, raid birds' nests in trees, and even dared to take on snakes in the underbrush. They were excellent for guarding homes and storehouses. Moreover, they ate little, given their small size. How much could they possibly consume? Raising them in the tribe offered many benefits and no drawbacks. As for the Li tribe's Li spirit theory, claiming that children who died young turned into these cats, Yu Fu scoffed inwardly. What era was this? Still indulging in feudal superstition? Truth be told, Yu Fu and his men, influenced by your scientific thinking, were rare atheists in this mystical primitive society, mainly because they had traveled widely and seen many tribes, one worshipping horses today, another donkeys tomorrow. If all these things were gods, then deities were rather cheap. Yu Fu held these local deities in particular contempt. He didn't deny that one or two animals might be exceptionally impressive and revered as gods, but those were definitely outliers. Just as in his entire life, having met so many people, he had only encountered one transmigrator like you. But could you say you were a man-god? Absolutely not. According to the theories promoted by the leader, you were a natural-born leader, an emperor, a monarch destined by the mandate of heaven to lead the people, completely different from those mystical entities. No. The Li chief stiffened, his neck resolutely objecting. These Li spirits are our departed children. We will never trade our own children for things. Their presence protects us and ensures our tribe thrives. Yu Fu rolled his eyes inwardly. Brother, your tribe's small population has absolutely nothing to do with whether you keep cats or not. Even if you raise 10,000 cats, without food, how would you feed your people? Why was the Han tribe powerful? Why did it have so many people? Wasn't it because we have enough grain, know how to farm ourselves, and have a stable food source? What does that have to do with the few cats you keep? Such a stubborn young man. He then thought of his own leader, Yu, also only in his teens. How could the difference between people be so vast? Chief Li, Yu Fu changed tack, suddenly asking, this food, is it delicious? Delicious, why? The Li chief looked baffled, unable to follow Yu Fu's train of thought. In our Han tribe, Yu Fu began to unleash his trump card. All tribe members can eat rice like this every day, year-round, filling their bellies at every meal, eating at least twice a day. Therefore, he persuaded patiently, our Han tribe has a huge population, a full 70 or 80,000 people, and we rarely hunt, so fewer people die, and the number of little cubs, newborns each year is also high. If you want your tribe's population to grow, why not join our Han tribe? In just a few years, your tribe's numbers could multiply several times over. What? The Li chief's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Everyone can eat this kind of food without dying from hunting, eating twice a day, never going hungry, all year round? And what does 70 or 80,000 people mean? Compared to everyone in our tribe put together? How many more is that? The young chief fired off a barrage of questions, cursing inwardly. This guy has some nerve. He doesn't even bother making his lies sound plausible. The Han tribe was formidable. Their weapons alone were terrifying. He admitted that. But, to say, all tribe members ate 2 full meals a day, year-round, never going hungry? He didn't dare dream of such a life. None of the large tribes he knew of nearby could claim they didn't lose people to starvation in winter. When food was scarce, didn't people go hungry? Only a fool would believe that. Yu Fu was definitely bluffing. 70 or 80,000 people. Yu Fu glanced around the Li tribe's tiny camp and gestured, using your tribe's camp as a measure. If 70 or 80,000 people lined up and you walked along the line, you could walk for 10 days and 10 nights and still not reach the end. Considering the chief likely couldn't grasp large numbers, Yu Fu replaced the abstract figure with a visual distance. This time, the Li chief was truly stunned, but he still didn't believe it. If the Han tribe truly had that many people, could they really eat their fill every day without going hungry? How was that possible? He had never seen such a thing, had no concept of it in his mind, and couldn't even imagine it. Thus, he decided to counterattack and expose Yu Fu's lies. "You just said that your Han tribe people don't need to hunt," he said, thinking he'd found a flaw. "Then what do so many of you eat every day?" "We eat rice," Yu Fu explained with sincerity. "In the morning, we use less rice to make congee. For lunch and dinner, we steam rice just like what you're eating. These are plant seeds. Well, you can think of them as fruit borne by plants, something like that. This stuff isn't prey, so there's no need for hunting at all." "Fruit?" The Li chief's eyes lit up, believing he'd grasped the key point. "So you gather it? With so many people, you go out every day to gather edible seeds? How much would that take? Wouldn't an area be picked clean in a few days? Do you take me for a fool? I'm a chief too, you know. We also gather sweet fruits. They get eaten quickly, grow slowly, and don't last long. Don't try to trick me." The Li chief held his head high, wearing a smug expression that said, "I've seen through your little game." After a round of friendly, read deceptive negotiation, the Li tribe, numbering only 82 souls young and old, finally decided they were throwing in their lot with the Han tribe. They would bring their entire families, and of course their precious darling cats, and follow Yu Fu's fleet. Yu Fu was inwardly smug. "Heh, little guys wouldn't trade the cats, huh? Fine. Then I'll just lure away the whole package, people and cats included, to consolidate their revolutionary friendship, and also because the sudden addition of over 80 mouths dramatically increased food consumption, Yu Fu decided to hang around for 2 more days. Firstly, it allowed the Li tribe time to pack their belongings, though they had little worth taking, being dirt poor. Mainly, Yu Fu wanted to seize the opportunity to send men to thoroughly scout the area around the Li tribe's camp, looking for any local specialties or mineral resources, and incidentally, sketch a rough map of the terrain. Secondly, they needed to build rapport. Weren't the Li tribe envious of the Han tribe's iron tools? Fine, let them borrow some to use for a bit, get their fill. Conveniently, this also allowed the newly acquired labor force to help replenish the fleet's dried meat stores. Thus, for the next 2 days, the scene changed dramatically. Yu Fu had the Li tribe women act as guides, leading a scouting party of 50 capable crewmen. Their mission was to get the lay of the surrounding land, and while they were at it, see if there were any cultivable melons, fruits, vegetables, or useful trees and stones. The Li tribe men, along with the remaining Han tribe crewmen, camped by the river, becoming crocodile terminators and beast reapers. They slaughtered wholesale in the mornings and evenings when animals came to drink. During the harsh midday sun, they took shelter in the shade, smoking meat and curing hides. If hides couldn't be properly tanned immediately, rubbing them hard with salt could preserve them for a while, preventing rot and stench in the short term. The Q. Young men of the Li tribe had the time of their lives these 2 days. Crocodiles they used to avoid were now tackled head-on with gleaming iron knives and spears. Having grown familiar with the Han tribe crewmen and listening to their boasts about how wonderful the Han homeland was, tools, weapons, anything you wanted, life more comfortable than an immortal's, they became even more determined about switching sides. As for clan identity or heritage, they couldn't care less. This broken tribe didn't even have an elder over 30. Talk of heritage was pure nonsense. These young people were extremely pragmatic. Follow whoever provides food. Joining. The Han tribe meant a better life, and that was the only thing that mattered. Meanwhile, the scouting party wasn't idle either. Luck was on their side, and they actually found 2 types of ore. One was an old acquaintance, copper ore. However, its quality fell a bit short compared to the Baba Ocean mining area back in the Han tribe's homeland, but it was still decent. It was primarily chalcocite, bluish-purple copper sulfide crystals. On the surface, malachite was visible, the result of the copper ore oxidizing under weathering. Deeper down, it was still copper sulfide. The other ore was new. None of you foos. Men had seen it before, but instinct told you foo it was definitely ore. As for its use, he hadn't figured that out yet. It was a vermilion-colored stone. The darker pieces looked like dried blood clots, somewhat reddish-brown. It wasn't very hard. A single strike with a rock could shatter it. The crewmen concluded it was ore mainly, because of its density. In one small area, these red stones were packed tightly together, and the color was so pure, a vibrant, unadulterated red. It clearly wasn't ordinary rock. Looking at the red stone, Yu Fu waved his hand dismissively. Who cares if it's metal ore or not? It's this red, and so soft it crumbles when ground. Take it back for dye or pigment, it'll definitely be useful. Little did he know, this was metal ore. Its scientific name is cinnabar, the raw material for refining quicksilver, that is mercury. The ancients had long known how to mine and smelt this substance. However, in antiquity, mercury wasn't often used for benevolent purposes. Its highly toxic properties were mostly exploited by pouring it into burial chambers to deter grave robbers and incidentally preserve corpses. For example, the legendary miniature map simulating rivers and seas with mercury in the mausoleum of the first Qin emperor supposedly caused lethal levels of mercury vapor in the tomb chamber, killing anyone who entered. That's why, to this day, only a few auxiliary pits, containing the terracotta army, have been excavated while the true underground palace remains sealed. Of course, mercury wasn't the sole reason. The primary concern was preventing changes in air composition upon opening, which could destroy the treasures within. For the current Han tribe, cinnabar's greatest use was indeed, as Yu Fu guessed, as a pigment. For instance, making ink paste for seals. The red ink paste the Han tribe currently used was a mixture of juice from a red plant dye, vegetable oil, and kaolin clay, with mediocre results. Using cinnabar, however, only required mixing the mineral with a little oil. Simple, convenient, and much more effective. Because Yu Fu didn't consider cinnabar a crucial mineral, and the Han tribe wasn't currently short on copper, he didn't rush to report it to you. He simply had the location carefully marked, collected some samples, and then led the crewmen and the newly joined Li tribe members, setting sail in a grand procession, continuing downstream. Fortunately, the sailboats were large enough. The Li tribe didn't have many adults and half were adolescents. Though the boat was a bit crowded, it didn't hinder daily life. The fleet's food supplies were also fully replenished. And so, onward, onward. Life aboard wasn't idle. Yu Fu had the crewmen bring out various bolts of cloth from the hold and patiently taught the Li tribe women how to make clothes. They couldn't let people meet you running around naked, could they? At the very least, adults and children needed decent clothing. The Li tribe men weren't idle either, learning sailors' tasks from the crew, rowing, handling the sails, tying knots, striving to lend a hand and contribute some effort on board. Although the Li tribe members hadn't yet reached the Han tribe's main base, just these few days on the boat already felt like entering paradise. This life, compared to before, was like heaven and earth. Though privately, the Han tribe crewmen found life on the boat quite hard. There's no place like home after all, and anyone away for long gets homesick. Yu Fu remained the same, unfailingly following your instructions, diligently recording the ship's log each day. Though this wasn't sailing on the open sea, logs for unfamiliar inland waterways were equally important. They provided experience for subsequent fleets and allowed constant monitoring of the crew's psychological and physical condition. These were the basic qualities of a competent fleet commander. Meanwhile, back in the Han tribe territory, after sending off the visiting Xin tribe delegation, you finally found time to inspect the newly established commanderies and counties. The new counties in Hanyang Commandery, Ruyang City, the capital of Ruyang Commandery, and its subordinate Sitong County all needed a visit. More than half a year had passed. How was the construction progress in these new cities? You had to see it with your own eyes. If progress was slow, the common people would face significant problems surviving the winter. decisions about stockpiling necessary supplies needed to be planned now, not left until late autumn when they'd be caught scrambling. It was late July, and the scorching summer days were nearing their end. Around Ruyang City, vast fields of rice were being harvested intensively. But when you arrived at Fuma Pass, north of Ruyang City, the second-season corn planted there had only grown thigh-high. Saga antelope in the wild give birth just once a year. Young ewes can start courting at 8 months, while young rams have to wait until they are a year old. This means that by 1 year old at the latest, the young antelope can contribute to population growth. This breeding rate is quite impressive for large mammals. However, being able to reproduce at 1 year old is just early maturity, much like human adolescence. A 1-year-old dog is roughly equivalent to a 7-year-old human. They only reach peak physical condition at 3. It's similar for Saga antelope, as they only live for 12 or 13 years. So, Eagle Sharp reported that the herdsman concluded that prime antelope, aged 3 to 6, are the most fertile. That makes sense. Below 3 years old, they are juveniles. 3 to 6 is prime, 6 to 9 is middle-aged, and after 9 they are old antelope. Prime antelope, the backbone of the species, theoretically have no problem giving birth twice a year. It's just that in the wild, they don't get enough food and are constantly at risk of becoming prey, so they have to conserve energy, giving birth only once a year to survive. But if raised in captivity, with ample food and water and guaranteed safety, the situation is different. Previously, antelope husbandry in the Han tribe was mostly handled by the old hands from the Sharphorn tribe, following the old methods of free-range or semi-wild grazing. The antelope raised this way were practically indistinguishable from wild ones. Your own impression of antelope farming was stuck on idyllic images of blue skies and white clouds, with horses. Oh no, antelope, running below. You had little concept of penned farming, only remembering that pigs were raised in enclosures. This time at Fuma Pass, because everyone was busy with city construction, there simply wasn't enough manpower for daily grazing, so they had to resort to penned raising. Unexpectedly, this necessity led to a pleasant surprise. If this method could be widely adopted, then the Han tribe's future supply of meat, hides, horns, wow, the thought alone is mouth-watering. You decided on the spot, get the name of that, herdsman who summarized his experience. Once this method is proven reliable, I'll reward him handsomely. Peerage, official position, arrange it all. Tell him to keep up the good work and continue summarizing. During captivity, do the antelopes. Temperaments change? What feed should they be given? Get it all written down clearly for me. This is a task I'm assigning personally. You paused, then added, Also, regardless of whether this method ultimately works out, reward him 30 coins first. Consider it a bonus for his sharp observation and initiative in reporting. Say it's, from me, leader. Eagle Sharp was a bit confused. But he's illiterate. What official position would you give him? Making him a county magistrate or something? He's never managed people. I'm afraid that wouldn't work, would it? He can learn to read. You waved dismissively. You couldn't either at first, right? If he can't manage people, assign him to a research department. Let's say, the Ministry of Agriculture. Though we don't have that department yet, we'll deal with it later, you explained briefly. The Ministry of Agriculture? Eagle Sharp was even more baffled. What kind of department is that? He had only heard you recently establish the Court of State Ceremonial, specifically for receiving foreign envoys, which sounded grand, but held little real power. Now this Ministry of Agriculture popped up, something he'd never heard of. It must be something the leader had just thought up on the spot. In truth, you had been planning to establish this Ministry of Agriculture for a while. In ancient times, this was the department specifically responsible for growing vegetables and managing grain for the imperial palace. Aside from tributes from various regions, the food consumed by the emperor, grains, vegetables, fruits, was mostly supplied by the Ministry of Agriculture. Furthermore, the department also served a research function. For instance, if Zhang Qian brought back some exotic seeds from the western regions, They would be given to the Ministry of Agriculture for trial planting first. Only if successful would they be promoted among the populace. As you understood it, this high-ranking department, one of the 9 ministers of old, was essentially the ancient equivalent of a modern agricultural research institute, improving and selecting grain seeds, high-yield crop cultivation techniques, crossbreeding superior livestock, experimental planting of foreign crops, animal husbandry techniques, even technical tasks like pig castration. All should fall under this department's research. Once understood, the findings would be promoted to the common people. Isn't that exactly what an agricultural research institute does? Why did an agricultural research institute hold such high status in ancient times? Obviously, ancient society was agrarian. Food was paramount. Food is the first necessity of the people, after all. So, the emperors valued this department and gave it high status, which made perfect sense. The Ministry of Agriculture, you explained, trying to use words Eagle Sharp could grasp, is basically an experimental department researching how to make livestock more productive and grains yield more. Needs exactly this kind of sharp-eyed, quick-witted, analytical talent. You'll understand later. You figured saying more would just confuse him. Oh, I get it. Eagle Sharp nodded, though seemingly only half understanding. Regarding the reward, I'll handle it right away. Should the money come from the county's accounts? Yes, do that, you affirmed with a nod. After inspecting the construction progress at Fuma Pass, you rode without stopping towards Matian County, 80 kilometers to the southwest. This place was an expansion of the former Bian tribe's main settlement. Matian County was built on the original site, primarily to facilitate the development of the more than 2,000 mu of existing ramie fields nearby. Nearly 3,000 people lived here now, so a considerable amount of additional land had been reclaimed for growing grain. Growing ramie didn't conflict with growing grain. Ramie only needed to be planted once. Afterwards, it could be harvested, repeatedly like cutting chives, at least 3 times a year, potentially 5 or 6 times if the weather was favorable. The key was that it required minimal management, growing on its own once planted, thus not interfering with the labor needed for grain crops. Matian County was newly established, and its residents were all immigrants who had just moved there at the beginning of the year. To get a harvest quickly, they chose corn, a high-yield grain with a short growing season. When you arrived, the second crop of corn here was just starting to joint, the green shoots like little trumpets shooting upwards rapidly. Barring any accidents, they would certainly be able to harvest another crop before winter arrived. The person in charge of Matian County was Stone, another old-timer from the Han tribe. This location served as the Han tribe's western gateway and had previously been breached by a cannibal tribe, so the top priority was defense, building the city walls. The housing for the common people, conversely, was secondary. The county seat was built on the original high slope. After expansion, it became a rammed earth city measuring 800 meters long and 400 meters wide. Why was this city rectangular when others were typically square? No particular reason, just terrain constraints. The high ground itself was elongated to maximize land use while still leaving space for administrative buildings, plazas, and the like. It had to be built as a rectangle. In terms of area, it was actually twice the size of Ruyang City. However, when you walked inside the tall, thick, rammed earth walls and saw the immigrants' living conditions, your brow furrowed. The walls provided ample security, but there were few decent houses. Instead, the open spaces were filled with numerous bamboo racks for drying corn, densely packed and looking quite spectacular. Corn isn't like rice. You first have to peel back the husk from the cob, then twist the leaves of several cobs together, tie a knot, braid them into a long string, and hang them up to dry completely in the sun before they can be threshed. Otherwise, freshly harvested, corn is damp. Rubbing it would just make it fall apart, so how could you thresh it? Your inspection tour continued. You had to see for yourself how your own territory was developing to feel at ease. Next stop, Danshan County. Upon arrival, You were quite satisfied with the construction progress here. Danshan County was located on the small plain below the southern slope of Tuogu Ridge, the old battlefield where you had fought the Fire Tribe. 27 kilometers. To the east was the Rushwi River, and to the south stretched vast primeval forests. The men in charge of this operation were the two rough-and-ready fellows, Hu Mankang and Chai Duoduo, supplemented by some civilian clerks transferred from Ruyang City. The overall leaders were Hu and Chai. Put simply, it was a temporary partnership. It couldn't be helped. You really couldn't spare anyone more suitable from your subordinates to be the top leader. Sending these two military men here initially was mainly due to the consideration that Danshan County needed to dig an artificial river, a massive undertaking. Relying solely on the common people would take ages to complete. So with a wave of your hand, you transferred 500 slaves over. With slaves, you needed soldiers to watch them and supervise their work. Thus, it made sense to have Hu and Chai, the military men, directly responsible, overseeing the slaves and handling construction simultaneously. Danshan County's city wall was also rectangular, 500 meters wide and 800 meters long. No moat was dug around it, so the walls were built incredibly high, with the base alone reaching 10 meters. Gate towers and watchtowers were constructed over the 4 gates and at the 4 corners, bringing the highest points to a full 15 meters. Even more impressive, unlike most cities in the Han tribe, this one featured a brick-faced rammed earth structure, on par with Ruyang City's walls. Other county seats were mostly simple rammed earth structures. Presumably, this was because the leaders were 2 military men who considered everything from a combat perspective first. Defense had to be maximized. Another reason was the sheer amount of earth excavated from digging the artificial river. There was far too much just for building the city walls, and it couldn't just be piled up randomly. Both banks of the future artificial river were designated as prime farmland. If you dumped massive mounds of earth there, how would you grow crops? Thus, Hu and Chai had a brainwave. Fire bricks. Simply fire all this earth into bricks to build the city walls and houses. Consequently, while Danshan County might lag in other areas, its walls and residential housing were already solidly built. Conversely, not much farmland had been reclaimed, and grain still had to be subsidized by tax grain allocated from elsewhere by you. However, the animal husbandry here was doing well, so the common people didn't lack meat. These newly built county seats shared a common feature. They were larger than Ruyang City. Back when Ruyang City was built, various limitations resulted. In a somewhat cramped design, 400 meters square, smaller than a modern elementary school. As it developed later, the space became genuinely insufficient, leading to considerable frustration. Danshan County had another unique characteristic. The residential houses were uniformly built with red bricks. This was unique in the entire Han tribe. Why red bricks? Because Danshan County was far from the river and lacked water. For daily drinking and construction, wells were sufficient, something the Han tribe had experience with. But large-scale irrigation, without a river or canal, was impossible. That artificial river was precisely the Water Conservancy project initiated to solve the irrigation problem. Without water, you couldn't cool the kilns to produce gray bricks. Hauling water bucket by bucket from wells to pour over the kiln tops? The inefficiency would work people to death. Therefore, when faced with the problem of disposing of the excavated earth, Hu and Chai proposed building brick kilns. Hearing about the water shortage, you made the decision directly. Build tunnel kilns, fire red bricks. No water needed, use air cooling. Although red bricks weren't as sturdy as gray bricks, they would last for several decades without issue. What about after several decades? Who knew? Worst case, they could rebuild. Perhaps Danshan County would have expanded again by then. Of course, the bricks used for the city walls and government offices were still gray bricks. The kilns were built near the river. Although transporting them was a bit more troublesome, they could use fewer bricks and more wood. Anyway, the forest wasn't far, providing an abundant supply of timber and firewood. When you arrived, the city walls and over 400 residential houses were already completed. The city's government offices were still under construction, and other areas were temporarily empty lots. However, a temporary livestock farm, primarily for raising antelope, had already been planned on the open ground. Women herded the flocks out of the city daily to graze on the plains, bringing them back in the evening. They were well fattened, so the area had plenty of meat and hides, just lacking grain. Without a water source for irrigation, only some vegetables could be grown in the fields, relying on well water. When would they be able to eat grain they grew themselves? It all depended on when that artificial river could supply water. To save time and allow the people to start farming as soon as possible, the artificial river plan you initially set was divided into several stages. Step 1. First, dig a small canal, 1.5 meters deep and 4 meters wide, just to bring the water over, allowing agriculture to develop quickly. Once the county seat stabilized, there would be plenty of time in the future to gradually widen and deepen this 27-kilometer-long small canal year by year, until it could accommodate boats, becoming a true artificial river. This was a long-term plan. However, the river was simply too long, and even the first stage of the project wasn't finished yet. Seeing you, Hu and Chai slapped their chests and guaranteed, before winter set in this year, they would absolutely finish digging the canal. It couldn't be called a river yet, just a canal. Bring the water over first and they could plant grain next spring. Finally, these two honest fellows looked at you expectantly and requested grain subsidies again. Lacking nothing else, they didn't have the nerve to ask for anything more. Noting Danshan County's grain deficit, you began your return journey. You'd first go back to Ruyang City for a look, then head over to the capital of Ruyang Commandery and Matian County. Normally, you weren't particularly attached to home, but ever since you had consummated the marriage with Little Dai and John Ying, well, you started missing your wives after just a few days apart. All three of you were in excellent health, no issues there. After your diligent efforts, both women had become pregnant. With loved ones to care for at home, naturally, you had to return frequently to check on them. They were just over 2 months. Pregnant, their bellies not showing yet. Why were you so sure? Because their periods hadn't come. You had long since told them both not to do heavy labor, fetching water, carrying water, chopping firewood. None of it was allowed. You just let them take appropriate strolls or do some needlework at home. Occasionally, they would visit the textile workshop in the city. When mother-in-law Shang found out, she also came over often to visit. You had even specifically spent money to hire 4 middle-aged single women, rescued earlier from the fire tribe, paying them wages to specifically care for Little Dai and John Ying at home, handling tasks like chopping wood, carrying water, and cooking. Of course, sometimes when Little Dai and John Ying had nothing else to do, they would cook a couple of dishes themselves or feed the chickens at home. Across 2 lifetimes, this was the first time you were going to have your own children. Although you weren't exactly inexperienced in your previous life, you had never formally married or had kids, so you were incredibly nervous and excited. Little Dai and John Ying felt the same. It was the first pregnancy for both of them, and they were carrying the leader's children. Moreover, compared to other young women in the tribe, they were relatively old to be first-time mothers. Added to the halo of being the leader's wives, they received immense attention wherever they went, showered with enough blessings to form a mountain. Both felt delighted, and their joy spread a festive atmosphere throughout Ruyang City. The tribespeople were all eagerly anticipating it, awaiting the arrival of these 2 little lives, hoping for a little one as intelligent as the leader, who would continue to lead everyone in the future, making the Han tribe increasingly prosperous, in their lives better and better. After spending an affectionate day at home with the 2 mothers-to-be, you set out again. Destination: Ruyang Commandery across the river. Ruyang City, the capital of Ruyang Commandery, was currently the largest single city in the Han tribe by area, measuring 1 kilometer long and 1 kilometer wide. Construction had been ongoing for a year and a half, making it one of the earlier established cities. It had a large population, and its production had long been self-sufficient. Apart from salt and iron, which still relied on external supplies, it lacked little else. However, construction progress was still not considered fast, mainly due to its large size. You came this time specifically to see how Ruyang City had developed. Although not far from Ruyang City, you hadn't actually visited much. Incidentally, you also wanted to check on how Rat Senior's business was doing, whether he had earned you a little profit. The Han Empire Bank currently still primarily handled institutional services. For instance, if a workshop needed to issue wages at the end of the month, they'd bring the slip you approved to withdraw money, or if a factory sold products and collected payment, after deducting costs and wages, the remaining profit had to be deposited into the bank. As for personal banking services for the common folk, things like demand or fixed-term deposits weren't supported yet, let alone money transfers. At most, people came to the bank to exchange loose change for larger denominations or vice versa. Anyway, nobody had much money in their pockets right now, so there was no urgent need to open numerous bank branches. In terms of architectural style, Ruyang City was definitely the absolute standout among all the cities. It boasted the widest variety of building types, the most comprehensive functions, and the most diverse styles. To draw an analogy, Ruyang City was like a multifaceted modern metropolis, while Ruyang City, it resembled an old residential complex, full of identical, cookie-cutter houses, as if made with copy and paste. Rigid uniform, lacking vibrancy and character. Of course, in the eyes of other tribes, Ruyang City's houses were already paradise, but compared internally within the Han tribe, Ruyang City, being the earliest built, indeed felt somewhat dated. However, you weren't bothered by this, nor did you feel any self-reproach. Each new city, having a fresh look and improved structure, indicated that the Han tribe was constantly progressing. Those diverse private buildings showed that the tribe's people were starting to develop their own aesthetic sense, and construction techniques were becoming increasingly sophisticated. The tribe's people were no longer just puppets acting solely on command. They were beginning to have their own ideas, learning to create. This represented a huge leap forward in thinking. Rat Senior followed closely by your side, animatedly describing Ruyang City's development. It was clear he took considerable pride in the territory under his administration. Although Ruyang City was just one city, its area was 4 to 5 times larger than Ruyang City's, equivalent to 3 or 4 market districts in Ruyang Commandery. It was currently the largest single city. Its population wasn't small either, now approaching 10,000 people. With a large population came vigorous demand for all sorts of things. Consequently, commerce here was particularly developed. Bamboo, products and animal hides from Ruyang Commandery, linen cloth, copper and ironware, tools and farm implements from Ruyang Commandery, all had to be continuously transported here, partly by water, partly by land. Coupled with currency circulation, Ruyang City was already beginning to resemble a central city. The two of you strolled to the city's silkworm farm, situated right next to the silk reeling workshop and the brocade weaving factory. This place operated an integrated production line, covering everything from raising silkworms to spinning, yarn, and weaving cloth. The person in charge, Sang Q, hurried over to report as soon as he saw you. Leader, we are currently raising white mulberry silkworms and green tussa silkworms. We reel 3 types of silk, 2 pure silks and 1 mixed silk. The variety of fabrics woven is extensive, with several different thicknesses alone, plus plain weaves and patterned ones. Production now runs year-round without stopping. You nodded, asking, regarding what I mentioned before, encouraging common households to also raise silkworms, how is that progressing? Have any families started raising them yet? Yes, Sang Chu quickly replied. This is largely thanks to Magistrate Shu's help. First, he encouraged everyone to plant mulberry trees in their own yards. Then, he organized people to take turns, helping out in our Sericulture house. This way, they could earn some wages to supplement their family income, and learn the techniques while working. After assisting us through 2 seasons of raising white silkworms, they're considered graduated. Then, Sang Chu continued explaining, Magistrate Shu sent clerks to teach everyone how to build sericulture houses. Tribespeople who learned could then come here to buy silkworm eggs and take them home to raise themselves. Once the silkworms spin cocoons, they sell the cocoons back to us. The subsequent reeling and weaving are handled by our workshop. Indeed, leader, Rat Sr. added from the side. The main issue is that our Han tribe lacks artisans, not having enough manpower to build silk reeling machines and looms. Otherwise, the common folk could reel silk themselves at home and sell the finished silk directly to the workshop. Although, it would be more trouble for them. They could earn more money. We really need to cultivate more artisans in the future. These things can't be rushed. You spread your hands helplessly. Allowing the common folk to raise silkworms and sell cocoons themselves is already quite good. Expecting every household to have spinning wheels and looms is beyond our tribe's current capability. Let's focus on popularizing sericulture techniques first, one step at a time. You knew well that while many things could be achieved quickly, cultivating talent required time. It takes 10 years to grow a tree, but 100 years to cultivate people. How could mastering a craft be easy? Take carpentry, for example. That requires mathematics. If you can't even read a ruler or handle basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, what kind of carpenter can you be? Some complex mortise and tenon joints even require knowledge of geometry, 3-view drawings, angles, pi. Otherwise, if asked to make a wooden bucket, wash basin, or wheel, you wouldn't be able to. Without knowing pi, how can you draw or make circles? Carpentry isn't just about sawing wood. Someone who only saws wood is at best a woodworker, far from an artisan. Those in the tribe who could currently be called artisans were the Han tribe's first generation of tech specialists, especially within the carpentry trade. Those who had participated in mechanical research and development in the Han tribe were top-tier experts. Water wheels, mills, windmill linkage mechanisms, levers, connecting rods, gears, pulleys. Creating these things required not only mathematics, but also some understanding of physics and mechanics. Although they didn't understand initially, you had been teaching them, and then these top carpenters trained apprentices, passing the knowledge down through generations. All this takes time. It cannot be accomplished overnight. After inspecting Ruyang City for a full day, you were very satisfied with its development. Reserves of winter supplies were ample. Grain, cloth, and animal hides were all in stock, requiring no concern or support from you. Thus, you departed from Ruyang City. The remaining targets were Matian County and Weishan Commandery. Oh, right, you also needed to visit the island in the Great Marsh to select sites for a coking plant and a coal washing plant. Only by developing these could the Han tribe's steel production skyrocket. With sufficient steel, more farm tools and weapons could be manufactured. Besides steel, there were other good things. With coal and sand, glass could be mass-produced. With glass, even more novel items could be created, and cheaper lighting fixtures. Currently, Han tribe lighting mostly relied on tung oil lamps, but those smelled strongly, had low output. Most of the oil was used for wood varnish, and were unaffordable for ordinary people. Candles were even scarcer. Without petroleum to refine paraffin wax, the pitiful amount of insect wax was mostly used for making wax models in metallurgy. The tiny remainder was only affordable for you and those at the magistrate level. Animal fat? Isn't it better used for cooking? Vegetable oil? Soybean and peanut oil were available, but using them for lamps produced a laughably dim light like fireflies. Acceptable in emergencies, but trying to read by such light, enough to make you go blind. But if you had coal, things would be different. Coal could be turned into coke. Heating coke and limestone, calcium oxide, could produce calcium carbide. Adding water to calcium carbide generated acetylene, YK. This substance was simple to prepare, and crucially, the supply was abundant. Coal and limestone were basically just rocks, making the cost appallingly low. Therefore, recreating the historical carbide lamp was entirely feasible, and it could even achieve universal adoption. You had initially considered kerosene lamps, but then thought, where would I find petroleum? Without petroleum, how could kerosene be distilled? So, kerosene lamps were out of the question. You could only leverage the already discovered coal deposits. And upon reflection, hey, these carbide lamps might actually be cheaper and easier to make than kerosene lamps.